Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Flat Out, a wonderful weekend of action in prospect with the King George, the most mouth-watering of prospects, a contest to savour. It really does look the most exciting race we've had in many years if all those entered turn up. That is to come. Again, many thanks to our sponsors for the podcast, that is Opulent Thoroughbreds, and alongside me once again, Joey Laver and Jack Nicol, to discuss everything this weekend and last weekend too. And one thing I should highlight is this is going to be a slightly shorter version of Flat Out because we've got a special Goodwood preview coming out on Monday next week. So do keep an eye out for that. And please comment with any fancies you have for either this weekend or indeed next week as well. Right, without much further ado, let's kick on. We're going to start by looking at last week, Jack. And that was a really fine week for you with a nice, juicy priced winner as well.
Yeah, it was nice to get back on the winning trail, Tom, with Orchid Bloom. Obviously, it was annoying that there was no market at the time. So hopefully some were able to see that. I think she was 7-1 in the morning before the Rule 4s. I think 11-4, 5-2. And then she was heavily backed into 6-4 and she won like a real handicap good thing, didn't she? I'd say she won't be waiting around in handicaps for too much longer and straight into stakes races after that. It was a really good performance, and as I said, I think an ease in the ground was really important to her. And obviously we've got the second half of the season to come. There'll be plenty of opportunities at home and abroad, probably in France for her. So yeah, I can see her picking up some black type before long. And Phantom Flight ran a great race. He probably had the race to run from, and it was just a going day for Al-Arsi, unfortunately, and he was back to near his best. But Phantom Flight gets the place money at least. So, yeah, a good weekend all around.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to have some success on the podcast. And Joey, what did you make of the action? Were you particularly taken by the winner of the Irish Oaks, Save the Last Dance? What was your initial reaction to that?
Yeah, I thought that it was slightly underwhelming. I mean, she looked beaten. I mean, I think she traded at the maximum, didn't she, on Betfair, which was probably overdoing it a touch because she was, she never quite dropped out of out of contention completely. So she's still there, but I think there are question marks over her trip and where she should be going next. She looked to be really struggling when the taps were really turned on and it was quickening, and people would think about the Ledger and races like that afterwards. I mean, I'm not entirely sure that a flat staying trip like the Ledger will really suit her either. It can require a bit of tactical speed in that race too. So, and she just seemed to lack it completely the other day. And if you go back to her Chester win, it could just be the ground really that accentuated her performance that day. And she was beating very, very moderate horses. So yeah, I think she's got a lot of questions to answer in the top class races coming later in the year. I thought Newbury was really good fun, actually. I thought it was a really competitive card, very upsetting to lose. Not to lose, but to basically have the day slightly spoiled by all the rain. Tom Jones played for an hour afterwards, though, which was a saving grace, and everyone stayed for it. I couldn't believe it. They're the biggest crowd since 2019. It was a decent day, and Mr. Haggis had a great day, didn't he, Jack? I mean, I think half of that Orchid Bloom getting back so heavily was because they just kept flying in, didn't they? The winners for him on the day. Your 5 winners or so on the weekend for Haggis came about a week too late, didn't it?
It's always the way, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But no, a good weekend's racing. Slightly disappointed with Get Ahead, but she wouldn't have liked that ground. With our way we tip on this show, we have to take risks for antepost. We get the benefit of being able to talk about prices we get, but the listeners can choose whether they back them now or wait for them at the weekend at slightly short prices. We take the risk and we have to put up with some non-runners, don't we? And that was Get Ahead. But yeah, no, other than that, I enjoyed the weekend.
What did you think of Relief Rally, Joey?
I thought it was seriously impressive. She's a really, really decent filly, isn't she, Jack? I mean, that must have been some pleasure. Did you manage to get on at a reasonable price in the end?
Well, I doubled up all my golf selections. Sadly, no one ever got close to Brian Harmon, did they? But as I said last week, I could let her go at that price. But no, look, she was a Group 1 horse in a probably was an average reel itself, but the way she won on probably the unfavoured side, the way she pulled so far clear of Beanham, who's obviously a decent juvenile in her own right, it was just a savage performance, wasn't it? And probably go to the Lowther and onto the Abbey from here. I think those races will really suit. I think 6 is probably her best trip in time, but no, it was a proper performance, wasn't it?
we're keeping a pretty close eye on the weather ahead of this weekend at Ascot. And currently the going is good to soft, but as the weather has been so changeable over the last week or so, it remains to be seen what we'll have it on the day. And I'll be interested to see your guys' take on that, actually. Let's start by looking at the King George, which I've been confident already is just the most exciting of races, if most of them turn up at the moment. August Rodin, King of Steel, the 3-year-olds. Hukum, Emily Upjohn, Desert Crown, Pile Driver. Luxembourg, Westover, Deauville Legend, Simca Mille, and a few others are entered as well. Joey, come to you first with this. Thoughts on what the ground's going to be and your take on the race?
It's very hard to say, isn't it? I mean, we're looking at kind of good to soft, aren't we? At the moment, and we've got the majority of the rain coming tonight. And then we're going to have a few drying days, but we've got the potential for some showers over the weekend. I mean, I just think you'd probably be operating on the basis of good to soft. Would you lads be in agreement with that?
It depends, honestly, on the forecast, but I think it could well be quite testing. I think it could be soft, possibly even worse. Depends how much they get. But as you say, tonight, Wednesday night, they could have upwards of 10 to 15 mils. So that would really, on softer ground already, would really get into it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking about 15 mils on the app I like to use. Which would, it just depends whether you've got some quite nice drying days on Friday in particular. But yeah, no, it could be soft ground. So you definitely want an animal that can handle a bit of dig. That's for sure. I mean, it's a fascinating race for sure. Tom, what would you be looking at in sort of your angle into the race? Where would you be looking for the winner?
I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? There are so many in there who've got strong chances. I mean, I'll be looking at it very much from the perspective of just enjoying the race. As far as the winner is concerned, I'd be keenest at the moment on a horse that continues to be an unsung hero, and that is Pile Driver, who won the Hardwick Stakes on his return. William Muir was quite adamant he wasn't going to be 100% fit for that, but he still won pretty impressively at Royal Ascot. And a horse who has obviously been there and done it. Won't mind if the ground's on the soft side. He's won the soft in his youth. And he's very solid, I think. And at the prices, he's certainly not unbackable at all, around about 6-7 to 1 mark. So he'd be my starting point, I think. For the others, particularly the 3-year-olds, despite the fact that Auguste Rodin and King of Steel have both proven themselves at the top level in their age group, of course, they've got to do it against the elders. And that would be the question mark against them. Hukum, despite being so impressive in the Brigadier Gerard, seeing off Desert Crown and beating Pile Driver easily last year in the Coronation Cup, it's one of those horses I'm just not. I'm finding it very difficult to warm to him for some reason. I think it's because we don't see him very often. I think he's been trained beautifully by Owen Burrows, and to keep on coming back from fairly significant layoffs to win, or at least some kind of hefty breaks in between his runs. And I think there's no better man at doing that really than Owen Burrows. Hukum is one who I think will be fine on the ground. He's won on soft ground in the past, and he won't mind a bit of rain. And Desert Crown's got a bit to prove for me after that run at Sandown, particularly after the kind of what's been in the news about him. And Emily Upjohn, she's pretty solid as well, but ran a stinker in the race last year, which would be a concern for me. I'd be keenest on Pile Driver, I think, Joey. What about you?
I think it's a very, very obviously very difficult race to kind of approach. You've got the unknown of the ground adding extra problems to it. You do have a load of Aidan horses in there, which is going to be interesting to see which ones do actually take their place. I think that will play a huge part in what we see, because one of those is going to be ridden like very forward. We're going to get a proper test, I would have thought, at the trip. I think that's what Auguste Rodin will need. I think the race revolves around how you view Auguste Rodin's bomb out in the Guineas and what you see the reasons are for it. I mean, I think he looks a pretty exceptional 3-year-old. Other than that, I'm not that fussed with the way he ran in the Irish Derby. I was so taken with the way he ran in the Derby, and I think the form's been franked so many times. I think he's a very solid favourite for this, and I would have him every day over King of Steel myself. I think I can't really see the case for the form being overturned there. So yeah, I think I really like August Round. I think he's going to have the setup for him. They're going to run the race to suit him with their extra horse in there. Over the ones that I think's overpriced, I think Westover's overpriced personally. I think he's the horse I'd probably have a few quid on each way, just because of the fact that I really like that run behind Equinox in Meydan. I think he's a very good animal when he gets a decent pace to run at, and I think this might suit him on the day. So if I was going to pick one to have a few quid on, it'd be him. And this goes to the other race as well. And then I'd have a saver, on August Redan. I wouldn't want to lose if he won at the price that he is now. What do you think on the race, Jack?
Well, I agree and disagree with some of the points you made there. I certainly agree on the angle of the Aidan O'Brien runners. It could well be quite tactical if they get 4 or 5 in there, and as you say, create an arrowhead at the front of the field. And I just remember Ryan Moore riding just a supremely good race when Highland Reel won this a few years back, and I could see maybe a Luxembourg forcing the pace again, and maybe Adelaide River up there, and just trying to get Auguste Rodin there on just off the leaders. And I think it could shape up to be a tactical race. And then I see the likes of an Emily Upjohn being held up. Obviously, you've got the others, Westover and Desert Crown, Hookham. So it's a fascinating tactical makeup of the race, and it'll be interesting to see what the draws are like. I'd say that they'll definitely want a low draw for Auguste Rodin just to get that early tactical position. With the ground as well, obviously that's going to amplify stamina, especially if they go such a quick pace. And then there's the form lines, obviously the Derby. And this is where I disagree with you. I think King of Steel, I think he's better than Auguste Rodin, I must admit. Problem is, I think the two of them there, the 3-year-olds, are short enough at the front of the market. And then the other form line is Hookham and Desert Crown, obviously. And this is where my bet in the race is. And I just can't get away from Desert Crown, the way he won the Derby last year. And I'm more than happy to forgive him last time. He came up there, Lumina, you looked like he was going to go and win by 4 or 5, didn't he, under Richard QIPCO? I think he's probably just got tired coming up the hill in the last furlong there. And Hookham, fair enough, he was out probably with a more serious injury. But I do recall the paddock notes, they were saying that Hookham looked $1 million and maybe Desert Crown had a bit to work on. I'd say Stouty would have left a bit on him, knowing that these bigger targets, the King George, the Judgmont, possibly even the Arc at the end of the season, would be where his big targets are. So, yeah, I'm keeping the faith with Desert Crown. Obviously, we've got a jockey upgrade and William Buick as well. I don't think there's many better than William Buick, obviously, riding the moment, probably other than Ryan Moore. So, yeah, I'm happy enough with that. And I just think at the price as well, 13-2, I think that's where the value is. There's certainly, considering Hookham's around 4, who's obviously a grand horse as well. I probably warm to him more than you do, Tom. Pile Driver would be the horse that I don't warm to. But, yeah, I think Desert Crown at around 13-2, 6-1. I think that's my angle in the race. I can see him having the tactical pace if they do go slowly into the straight. I think he probably won't be too far away in mid-division, and having that turn of pace that could maybe, if it can do whatever he likes on him, can Williams. So, yeah, he's my selection in the race.
I would be interested to know why, because I think we should give it a bit of time because it's such a good race. Why do you think King of Steel is a better horse than Auguste Rodin? I thought it was fairly comprehensive in the Derby.
So just my viewing of the Derby, Stoddard he gets to a point where he just has to commit, and I think he would have loved to have just hung on to him another half furlong. And I must admit, in that last furlong, you do always kind of feel, Auguste Rodin's gonna reel him in. But King of Steel, obviously, that was his first run of the season. He'd been withdrawn at York, and I just think it would have been desperate for connections because I really do believe that if you'd just been able to hold on to him a bit longer, and depending on the makeup of the race now is the other thing, but I just think he probably would have been able to hold on to him a bit longer. I think he would have been able to have won.
I wouldn't say that. I don't think that's particularly compelling, but yeah, no, I'd be.
Yeah, I've not been the most eloquent in explaining that. I just think he's went to Ascot, and then obviously Varians weren't even probably in top form then. He's won despite that. And I do remember after the Derby, the connections were saying, let's kind of avoid Auguste Rodin from there. He's then went and kind of workmanlike to beat Adelaide River, and they've probably thought, well, what have we got to fear here? And as I say, I just think if he was able to have been held on to a bit longer, has the benefit of 2 runs now. He's obviously in peak fitness. he's an improving horse as well. That was only his third career start in the Derby as well. So I just think he's a serious animal. Obviously, the price is the stickler here. I think 7-2 for both of the 3-year-olds compared to this deep field is pretty short for them, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm actually slightly in your boat, Jack. I think, though, a lot of this kind of King of Steel loving recently compared to August Rodin, because there's a lot of people who've agreed with you, is the fact that there's a lot of recency bias, if you like, in terms of visuals, I think. Because, as you say, August Rodin wasn't that impressive visually at the Curragh, whereas King of Steel, albeit in a slightly lower grade, was very impressive at Royal Ascot. I think people have got that in their minds and are just kind of cottoning onto that a bit.
I will add, I do think August Rodin, that wasn't his proper run in it at the Curragh. It was such a windy day as well. And the way the race kind of worked out, he is much better than that as well. But I just think of the two, King of Steel is the one I definitely want to be with on the Derby run.
Nicely done. Right, let's move on, shall we, to the big other race of the weekend that is just preceding the King George at Ascot, and that is the International Stakes. Very competitive Class 2 handicap. Always is. There's no doubt about that. And I think we've got a couple of people on this podcast, Joey and Jack, who have got some fancies in it. And Jack, let's start with you this time because, with soft ground in the air, I think that's going to make one of your selections, if I'm right in thinking it's what I think it is, a little bit more of a, gives him a few more positives in the race, I would say.
Yes, well, earlier in the week on Monday morning there, just before confirmations were made, I tweeted out that I'd backed Biggles and Barrador. I feel a bit dirty now putting them up again at short enough prices, but I just can't get away from Biggles, the way he won in the Bunbury Cup, which was, he never really looked like getting beaten, and Ryan Moore just kind of had to wait for the gaps. He's under a penalty here. I know Joey obviously mentioned last week, and he gave a really good word for him, and I agree, echo all those points that he made as well. He's £2 well in here. Ryan Moore's jocked up again. He won't mind if it's quick ground. It's more likely softer ground, and I think he's even better on that. I then have unfinished business with Barrador, who were tipped up earlier in the season in the Victoria Cup. I do have some sympathy for Kevin Stott. I think it was probably a collective decision for them to come over to the stand side. You do go into Ascot and think, oh, I want a higher draw. So the decision to come over, then he didn't get a clear run, and I just think he's better than that. He's actually £1 lower now than the Victoria Cup. He's into around 11-1, which is, I think, is still, there's enough juice in the price there. And I just think the two of them, it doesn't look a deeper renewal of what it has been in the past. And I just think those two are probably clear, given softer conditions. I think Barrador is a proper tool over the 7 furlongs with cutting the ground, and certainly well handicapped of 96. So those would be those are the two bets I've already had in the race, and I really fancy both of them, to be fair. And as I said earlier, I don't mind backing two in a race, and if one doesn't win, I'm expecting the other for sure.
Pretty strong case made for what is a very competitive handicap, although you seem to think it's not quite as potentially feeble.
I think these two are just clear.
Yeah. Strong case. Joey, what do you think about the race?
I really like Biggles, but I mean, I can't be putting him up at that price personally. I think there's a chance, that given, I think it's competitive enough, and you might get, sevens each way with some extra places later in the week. But I think the case for Biggles is clear, and obviously I don't need to rehash that. I will rehash again though my case for Bless Him, and I think that Bless Him ran a fantastic race in the Bunbury Cup. He was probably ridden a little bit more prominently than you would like him to be ridden usually. There was quite a few non-runners on the day. It was a smaller field. It's not really what he needs. He likes to be delivered late. He's going to come in here £1 lower, and he's going to have Jamie Spencer back on. And I think when you get him in these straight course races at Ascot, he's just the two of them together are going to be right there on the scene, and he's just a solid each way bet. And he's just too big based on that run. They all finished pretty close in a line. Him, Awal, and the rest of them in the Bunbury Cup, and he's 16-1. The rest of them are a fair bit shorter, so I think he makes a fair appeal each way for me. And the other one would be a Wal again. I respect Baradar. Baradar's clearly the one coming in here that you go, yeah, he's well handicapped. A Wal's ran some fantastic races off a mark of 105, and I just think he might be there again, there and thereabouts again. And the really key thing for him will be the ground. The soft ground will give him a real chance. If he gets a decent draw, I think he'll be right there in the finish. So that run behind Sonny Liston and Jimi Hendrix, I think that's really, really solid and shows he can probably win one of these races off a mark of 105. And so the two I'd be taking would be a Wal and Bless Him, just because I think they're very solid to run their races in this. And with having a non-runner last weekend, I want to get a run for my money this week, and my best bet will be Bless Him.
And I'm going to wade in with another different one. It's 5 horses we're putting up on in this race on this podcast. What could possibly go wrong? I'm putting up a horse who's a pretty much an each way bet to nothing, to be perfectly honest. So I think he's almost guaranteed to be in the frame, provided there is a little bit of juice in the ground. That's Var Fortino for Kevin Philip and a horse who we know that loves the straight. Ascot won the Victoria Cup last year and has pretty much kept his form fairly well so far this season. Finished third in the Victoria Cup, was beaten at Royal Ascot when the ground was too quick for him, I think. And last time at York, when beaten a short head by Northern Express, he's in the race under a £3 penalty, which gives him a nice swing in the weights. The ground was officially good, but there was plenty of rain around, and it took some getting through. And those two were the ones who came to the fore. And off the same mark, I'm thinking Fortino back at Ascot has got to have a massive chance of getting in the frame. And around about 11, 12 to 1 is really obvious, sticks out to me. He might be vulnerable to the likes of Biggles, who are improving, but he's very solid in big handicaps at Ascot with juice in the ground. So, yeah, he'd be my pick, I think. Talking of which, go on, Jay.
I think it's worth reminding viewers that we obviously had a nice chat with George Bowie on the head of the July Festival, and he had a few things to say about Spangled Mac and also Baradar. They might be worth, if you fancy those two, going and checking out what he said. So, yeah,
good shout. Very, very good shout. Always an eloquent spokesperson is George Bowie. Talking of strong fancies in that race, let's move on to our best bets of the weekend. Joey, what would your best bet be?
Nice and quick for me. I've already given it away, and that would be Bless Him. Just on the basis that, as I said, just to highlight an extra angle, is that the horses that tend to go well in the Bunbury Cup come and really run well in this. I said I think Burnt Sugar was the last one to double up. Bless Him nearly did it last year, and I think if you don't fancy this horse, you think he's a bit too old, I wouldn't be surprised if I've seen enough from him this year to suggest he's in similar form, and I think he might go close again. Bless Him for me is my best bet of the week, Tom.
Excellent stuff. Would love to see Bless Him win once again. And Jack, what about you?
I'm going to go in the big race, and can't get away from Desert Crown. There's some standout 13-2, but he's a general 6-1, and I just think that's far too big for a horse as classy as this. And if he rediscovers that Epsom Derby form, then he'd be very hard to keep out the frame, and obviously go very close to winning. As I've mentioned, William Buick's it's a jockey upgrade, and yeah, I think he'll be coming to the boil nicely. Stoutly bringing him along, and I think this race could really suit and hopefully see him back to his best.
Awesome. I'm going to go slightly left field and discuss a race we haven't discussed yet for my best bet. That is the Valiant Stakes on Saturday at Ascot, the 225 over a mile. That is the round mile for 3-year-old fillies and mares, 3 years and above. And my selection is Villanova Queen, who you'll remember who won at Ascot, Royal Ascot, that is, in the Kensington Palace fillies handicap. Obviously only a handicap, but a very competitive one. 19 runners. She was a big price that day, but I thought the way that she came down the outside, enduring a slightly unideal trip, was pretty impressive in the end. And she went clear in the closing stages to win nicely. My slight concern is that she's unproven with cutting the ground. Her one run in it, when the ground was soft to heavy at Leopardstown in Group 3 last year in the Amethyst Stakes, or earlier this year, I should say, in the Amethyst Stakes, was very underwhelming, but she didn't seem to be firing at all then. And I think is worth another chance with juice in the ground, but I don't think she'd want too much of it. My main angle into this really is that I don't think it's the strongest of races in the world. You've got Grand Dame and Prosperous Voyage, who are looking to kind of rediscover some form, and Random Harvest as well. Villanova Queen coming in here with a career best and gets exactly the same conditions in terms of the way that the race is set up. It gets the round mile and at Ascot. So I think, considering she's still quite unexposed over a mile trip, I think she might even get further in time, but for now they're keeping her over this trip. For me, marks her out as a very decent each way bet, improving up to a mark of 104 on ratings. Has very little to find with the best fillies in this race so far. And with that kind of time form plus sign of progression next to her name, I think she's got a big chance around about 8-1, which I think is a very fair each way stab for Villanova Queen. And Jack, let's have your anti-post angle for this week, shall we?
Yeah, so as we mentioned at the start of the program, we're going to come back early next week for the Goodwood preview. But I just want to put one up there for Tuesday, and that's in the Lennox Stakes. My selection in the July Cup was Kinross, but back to 7 furlongs. He doesn't have a penalty here in the Lennox. He won the race in 2021, second last year, trying to burrow up the far rail, nearly won. But yeah, I think back to 7 furlongs. Doesn't really matter what the ground is. It's probably going to be on the softer side, bear in mind with all this rain and without those penalties. And my own kind of concern would be you get some hard luck stories around Goodwood, and it's so hard to win from off the pace as we saw last year. But Kinross, he's quite versatile. He can go from the front and that. And I think around 7-2 in standout in places, but a general 3-1, I think he's a standout bet. I can see him going off really short, 6-4 around that. Frankie back on board. I think everything's in his favour to win here and going on to bigger targets at the end of the year like the Foray and the like. So yeah, I think he's a good bet to start off the week around. If you can get the 7-2, I think that's an outstanding price.
Yeah, and we will obviously touch on Glorious Goodwood, the Qatar Glorious Festival, I should say, in its entirety on Monday. So do check out our podcast for that. Time for any other business on Saturday, and I'm going to kick off actually with my other fancy for the weekend, and a horse that I think is overpriced in the Sky Bet York Stakes on Saturday, the 3:15, and that is Savvy Victory, who is underrated because he's trained by Sean Woods. Sean's a very smart trainer. He had extreme success in Hong Kong. I think he won about 43 million in prize money over there, which allowed him to buy Jeremy Nazida's place in Newmarket. And since he's joined a couple of years ago, it wouldn't have been the speediest of starts, but that's not really the way that Sean Woods operates. He's very patient with his horses, and he started to develop a nice training program with horses coming through. And I think he's starting to find the trick to winning some of these big races. And Savvy Victory was successful last time at Sandown in listed company in the Gala Stakes, partly thanks to a bit of a pace collapse from the front, Poker Face and Saga taking each other on. And Notre Belle Bet was up there too. So Savvy Victory had a nice kind of toe into the race under Tom Marquardt. But I was still quite taken by the way that he went clear in the closing stages. I thought it was a really nice performance. And I think this extra half furlong at York on Saturday is really going to suit him. And that was a much better performance than he'd been showing recently, earlier in the season. And I think he's just coming to hand now. It's soft ground at the moment at York, and that will suit him down to the ground. He's got good form with juice underfoot. Won at Goodwood last year and good to soft, and finished second to Pride of America in a handicap earlier in the season at the Chester May meeting with soft ground in the going description. So I think that will be no barrier to success. And 16-1 is a very fair price because there are a few in this who are looking with something to prove. Nation's Pride being one of those, hasn't run since Maidan. That was quite a while ago. A little bit to prove, I think, back on home soil. My Prospero certainly got something to prove. I know he's a Group 1 horse running in a Group 2 race, but at the same time, he's not been blowing my mind so far this season. And what I will say about Savvy Victory's chance as well is that he gets
that's some ask. Be blowing your mind, Tom. Yeah, that's what you want from the horses. Blow your mind.
He's not really been getting the strong pace that he's needed, I don't think, so far, apart from last time. But he should get that with Mashur in the field because Johnny Murtagh's contender likes to go from the front. So, I can see Savvy Victory running a good race in the Sky Bet York Stakes at a good price. Jack, any other business for you?
Just to touch on that Sky Bet York Stakes, I think William Huggis probably has nightmares about it. He's had Dubai Honour, Mahafeth and Adabe all beaten in the last 4 years in that race. So, yeah, I'm going to break a habit of not putting up a Huggis horse this year. But, yeah, my Prospero... My Prospero, he's probably going to go off odds on, isn't he? And yeah, to be fair, I do think he will. As you boys know, I think this is a Group 1 horse, and this is probably an ideal opportunity to get back on the winning trail. But as we've seen with those horses mentioned, I'd say he has nightmares about that, and he'll be hoping to snap that poor record in the race in recent years. But in terms of other bets this weekend, not only there's no market for the feature race on Friday evening at York in the Lyric Stakes, but there's one horse here that I've been waiting for since the Middleton Stakes back at York in May, and that's State Occasion. I think that is incredible form, really, when you look at it in terms of a filly's perspective. Freewid, she went and disappointed Ascot, but in behind you had Rogue Millennium, who's went and won the Duke of Cambridge. Stay Alert was second in the Pretty Polly. And then you have the likes of Sea Silk Road and Poptronic, who've kind of, their forms intertwined since, but one's won a Group 2, one's won a Group 3. And then you have State Occasion, who I was really hoping was going to run in the John Smith's Cup off her handicap mark there of 103. I think she's very well handicapped in that respect. But I think the main objective for them, keeping her in training this season, was to get black type. I think that's really important for obviously going on to be a broodmare. So I suspect this has been the target since then. They skipped the John Smith's Cup. She was in until the last stage, didn't get declared. She was so impressive over course distance at the back end of last season, and she's already jocked up, but sadly there's no prices as yet. Otherwise, she probably would have been my best bet. I do think she might be a good each way price with the likes of Electric Eyes, who was touted as a real live Guineas contender early in the spring, and Queen for You, who's got a bit to prove now. She steps up and trip, but I think they might take up a bit of the market, and I'm kind of hoping maybe for double figure odds for State Occasion. I really like her. My only concern is I'm not sure about her on really soft ground, but I think it is going to be dry now, and maybe good ground will be absolutely fine. And I think that form is sensational, and dropping here into a listed race. We know she likes course and distance, and yeah, I'll be keenly looking out for the market on this one. And yeah, State Occasions, as I said, it's a horse I've been looking out for a couple of months now.
Lovely. All that's left to be said, I think, Joey, is how exciting a weekend in prospect with that King George. Could be a race for the ages.
Certainly could be. It certainly could be a race for the ages. I do have a couple of horses that I do want to mention. I'm going to mention them. I do thinking up against your horse, Tom, on Saturday. Luckily, I think you're going to get away with it because this horse that obviously I've talked about before, that I really love it, Amena. I think she's an absolute beautiful animal. Roger Varian thinks she's a really talented filly. I think this is a really good horse and is going to win a race, but she needs decent ground and she's not going to get it again. So you're going to get away with it this time, I think. And she's going to have another one of her intended targets scratched out because of the rain. So that's very sad, but one to definitely keep an eye on still. Get Ahead. I understand will go to Goodwood for the 5 furlong race to Group 2. She's one I definitely will keep. I'm back in today. I'll keep her on side. Clive Cox thinks that back to Goodwood, a place where she's won really well before. It wasn't really my reasoning. I thought up to 6, a flat 6 would see her to her best, but no, he feels that I think she's an improving filly, so I'm going to give her a chance as well at 5. Of course, she's won at already. I think it's a winnable race outside of Highfield Princess. So at the moment, but we'll have to see what turns up. But I think 20-1 each way is an interesting bet at this stage, and so I'll put that up half a point each way. And the other one is actually, I might be one of the only people in the UK who's looking forward to the return of the Racing League this week. I'm very excited about it. You can
say that again.
Very, very excited. I am pumped for the Racing League. Well, that's because Like a Tiger goes in the 8:30 tomorrow at Yarmouth. Soft ground's what he wants. He has been scratched. Let's have a look at this just to make sure I get it right. 1, 2, 3, 4 times in search of soft ground in the last few months. And tomorrow night at Yarmouth, he is going to get it. He's going to be 5-1 at the moment. I recommend backing him each way. He's jocked up with Hayley Turner. He's also really like the way he hooped around the field at Newmarket with a bit of dig underfoot was so taking to me. I think he's got improvement off a mark of 92. I think the soft ground was definitely what caught him out behind Castle Way the following time. Sorry, the good ground. It's just he's got quite a knee action on him. He definitely wants a bit of dig. Tomorrow night he's going to get it, and so I'll be sitting down there with the missus with a nice cold pint of something, ready for the Racing League and ready to see Like a Tiger winning at Yarmouth. Why else would we love this great game other than that?
I'll tell you what, you're starting to get me excited about it now, Joe. I have to say, I'd be more excited about it if it was on Racing TV, of course. But you can't have everything.
You can't have everything.
No.
We'd have to have Chapman then, though, wouldn't we? That would be the downside. He's part of the package. He's part of the Racing League package, isn't he?
Oh, he certainly is. Yeah, he would be going anywhere from that. Gents, thanks very much. Really enjoyed this week. And as I say, do look out for our podcast at the beginning of next week on Monday, most likely, because it'll be focusing on the Qatar Glorious Festival, all about Goodwood. So many good races to enjoy and preview and analyse before what is a fine 5 days of racing on the Sussex Downs. Last thing for me to say is please do gamble responsibly. Gambling should be fun. And when the fun stops, do stop. And remember to like and subscribe. And check out the website, Opulence Thoroughbreds, if you fancy getting involved in some ownership with them. Plenty of opportunities in syndicates with Opulence Thoroughbreds. That's it from us until make sure you turn up to our show next week, the Glorious Goodwood preview.